In this video, I will cover the CHP or California Highway Patrol. Ignore the stuff behind me. I'm in my brother's bedroom. It's the only place available right now. But I'm Nicholas, and you're watching the Law Enforcement Agency Information Channel. The California Highway Patrol, or CHP for short, officially the California Department of California Highway Patrol, is the primary California state law enforcement agency and falls under the California State Transportation Agency, or CSTA for short, which falls under the executive branch of the California state government. The CHP is responsible for enforcing state motor vehicle and traffic laws such as the California Vehicle Code, primarily on California interstate highways, state properties, and certain unincorporated areas of the state. With that being said, they can legally operate anywhere within the state of California in order to enforce state laws, regardless of what kind. But again, that's their legal authority. Their primary authority, like I said, is and focus, like I said, is enforcing state motor vehicle and traffic laws on California highways, state properties, and unincorporated areas. But some specific duties of the CHP include patrolling and policing California highways, waterways, and really any area that lacks proper policing, facilitating and or blocking the flow of traffic on California highways for major motor vehicle accidents, construction zones, and protests like those we see in LA. Of course, also on roads parallel or adjacent to state properties, they also, monitor the flow of traffic there too. But then, of course, also protecting important state owned buildings and properties, such as especially those that lack their own official police forces, such as the California State Capitol, the California State Library building, and California State Courts. Those are really state buildings that don't have their own official uniformed police forces. And then, of course, also protecting important state officials. The CHP will generally provide security details to important state officials, state constitutional officials such as the governor of California, and other very important officials. And then, of course, also, assisting local police when needed or requested, working with fellow first responding agencies, and much more. The CHP is, with approximately 11,000 employees, of course, the majority of which being sworn officers, the largest state level law enforcement agency in the U.S. They are also, fun fact, the one of, if not the highest paying state police agencies in the U.S. Considering the average annual salary of a CHP officer is $150,000 per year, which is pretty good. And additionally, another fact, but not so fun of one, is that since the founding of the CHP, approximately 233 officers have died. CHP officers have died in the line of duty, for different causes. This one thing unique about the CHP is that unlike most state police agencies in the U.S., the CHP it refers to its officers, its sworn uniformed peace officers, as not troopers but rather officers, which is highly unusual for a state police agency. So if you were to identify a CHP officer, you would refer to him or her as a CHP officer rather than a CHP trooper. Another unique thing about the CHP is that it is led by a commissioner. Most state police agencies are not led by a commissioner. They're typically led by a lieutenant colonial. The CHP being one of the very few that is led by a commissioner. It is especially unique because a commissioner in any law enforcement agency is typically a civilian position, not a sworn peace officer position. In the CHP, the commissioner is actually a sworn peace officer position, which makes it even more unique. So yeah. The California Highway Patrol was established on August 14th, 1929 by California state legislatures under the approval of the Governor of California. It was originally established as a component or unit of the California Division of Motor Vehicles, which is nowadays known as the California Department of Motor Vehicles, under the California Department of Public Works, which is nowadays known as the California State Transportation Agency. However, in around 1947, California state legislatures, under the approval of the Governor of California, passed legislation that basically made the California Highway Patrol its own department under the California Department of under the California Department of Public Works, which I believe this was also around the time that the California Department of Public Works changed its name to the California State Transportation Agency. However, I mean, it's important to note that upon when the CHP was established, it wasn't the only primary de facto state police agency in California. Upon the years of its establishment and founding, there were two de facto primary state police agencies. The first was the CHP, and the other was the California State Police. Now, what was the difference? Essentially, the difference was that the California Highway Patrol, they were responsible for enforcing California state motor vehicle and traffic laws explicitly on California highways. And now I know that's still their primary responsibility today. However, not all of their other responsibilities, like protecting the Governor of California, they had at that time. Their authority in the years after their establishment was very limited. It wasn't until like the late 1990s that they actually became that their authority expanded. The California State Police, on the other hand, their authority was much broader. They were responsible for enforcing state criminal laws throughout the state of California, and of course, and also protecting important state buildings and state officials, such as the California State Capitol Building and Governor of California. Again, these kind of duties, additional duties, are nowadays invested within the CHP. Before I get into their merger, I do also want to bring up some other differences. Another difference was that the California State Police, they were significantly older than the CHP. They were established in the late 1800s, while again the CHP was established in the 1920s. However, with that being said, the CHP was actually significantly larger, despite the fact that California State Police was older. They have multiple more officers than the California State Police did. And I believe, and basically, and also the officers from the California State Police, they were known as troopers. The California members of the California Highway Patrol, they were more known as state traffic officers, or yeah, something along those lines. They were not the CHP never really referred to its officers as troopers, formally. But then I mean, yeah, that's the primary difference. The California State Police was absorbed by the CHP, in around around 1995. The California Highway Patrol absorbed the California State Police. But between 1929 and 1995, there were two de facto state police agencies. Technically, the California State Police, technically they were the official primary state police agency of California at the time, considering their authority was significantly broader, and they were basically, I guess you could say, the California State Police, they were technically, between 1929 and 1995, the primary state police agency. However, the California Highway Patrol was also definitely high up there too. In 1995, they merged. The California State Police was absorbed by the California Highway Patrol under legislation passed by California state legislatures under the approval of the California governor. Ever since, nowadays, the California Highway Patrol, there, while they still have primary responsibility over California highways, their primary responsibility has also expanded to state properties. Before that, they didn't really have that. They didn't really have responsibility over protecting state properties. They had basically between 1929 and 1995, when they were their real responsibility was California highways. Nowadays they conduct a wider range of duties and have a much broader authority. That's pretty much it for their main establishment, and yeah. On April 5th to 6th, 1970, at approximately 11 p.m. in Newhall, California, officers Walt Frago and Roger Gore from the CHP, who were at the time known as state traffic officers, conducted a felony stop on two individuals. The two individuals, Bobby Davis and Jack Twinning, would now be known as the perpetrators of the largest law enforcement shootout in U.S. history. Officers Frago and Gore had conducted the traffic stop in response to a bolo they were alerted about earlier involving the two individuals. Officer Frago, the passenger, and Gore, the driver, addressed themselves as CHP. They then, in compliance with CHP felony stop procedures, ordered Davis, the passenger, and Twinning, the driver, to raise their hands. Davis and Twinning originally cooperated with the officers by raising their hands through the window. However, things changed when they were instructed to step out. Instead of reaching for the door handle, Davis took out his gun, opened his door, and out of nowhere began shooting at Officer Frago. The driver, Twinning, then swung open his door and began shooting at Officer Gore. Gore responded with shots but was eventually taken out with the help of Davis. However, unfortunately for them, as they were a part of a felony stop, 1032s were already en route. Soon, two other CHP officers arrived on scene and took fire at the suspects before receiving fatal shots. Then, a bystander, former U.S. Marine, tried to help the officers by taking their service weapon and firing at the suspects. However, he was outnumbered and outgunned by the two suspects with multiple armed rifles. He died shortly after receiving fatal shots without immediate medical help. It wasn't until a fifth CHP officer arrived on scene that David and Twinning decided to flee. However, they fled in different directions. Davis stole a car but was found and taken by local police shortly afterwards. Twinning, on the other hand, fled into a nearby house whose owner he took hostage. Soon, numerous Los Angeles County Sheriff deputies surrounded the house. Twining, most likely reflecting on how he'd probably be in jail for the rest of his life, committed suicide shortly after they breached. The occupant of the house was thankfully unharmed. Davis was sentenced to the death penalty by the state of California. However, he committed suicide at the prison for which he was being held at before he could receive the death penalty. The entire incident is commonly referred to as the Newhall Incident or Newhall Massacre and led to significant changes in training standards and department policies on felony stop procedures, not only for the CHP, but for many other law enforcement agencies too. It's been a hard year for law enforcement in LA ever since the recent 2025 anti-immigration protests. These protests were primarily made to target federal immigration enforcement agencies like ICE and the CBP for their recent mass deportations in major cities like LA. However, ironically, the agencies and officials they've been seen targeting the most have been local and state law enforcement. These protests have also been called the No Kings protests as a way to show their anger against the Trump administration for ordering these recent mass deportations. Basically, these protests significantly escalated when when President Trump sent in the California National Guard and U.S. Marines to L.A. The protests significantly escalated there from just a somewhat normal protest to a significantly violent protest that was all over national news. They significantly escalated there. In around June 7th, 2025, the Governor Newsom of California sent in the California Highway Patrol to help assist in the major protests. Now, he explicitly highlighted when sending in the CHP that he sent in the CHP not to assist in federal immigration enforcement operations, but rather to help monitor protests and block off highways for the major protests that were happening in LA. So basically, their main duties. But protesters, they kind of seem to take it a different way after they were seen doing things like, lighting up CHP cars on fire. This particular incident happened on California Highway Route 101. It was just below a bridge where protesters could be seen standing. The California Highway Patrol cars, they were under that bridge. Some of them were under that bridge. Some of them were along the bridge. The ones that were along the bridge, they were the ones that were lit on fire. The protesters, they could be seen throwing things like, things from rocks, full-size adult scooters, chunks of concrete, again, many heavy stuff. However, what actually led the CHP cars to catch on fire were the more violent protesters who threw flammable objects like, tear gas and fireworks at the patrol cars. It was actually that all the fireworks, all the debris you saw on the highway throughout the news near those California Highway Patrol cars, that was from the explosions that occurred when they threw those fireworks and tear gas at those cars. Many of the individuals charged with doing such were caught by the CHP eventually, not all, this led to significant, the significant. It led to a lot of things. One thing it led to was the CHP. They had to move their cars under the bridge so that way they weren't affected from the above. But it didn't really make the CHP happy in more simple terms. Because again, the protesters who threw those fireworks and other flammable objects, they completely destroyed the CHP cruisers. They were completely destroyed to the entire extent. They were not usable. They were completely destroyed. And luckily, to my knowledge, no CHP officer has yet been hurt from those explosions. That's been really much it for those major LA protests and the CHP's involvement. The CHP, when it comes to their jurisdiction, maintains primary territorial jurisdiction over California interstate highways, state highways, and state properties. And when it comes to state properties, this would include state parks, state buildings, state forests, state-owned facilities, and pretty much any form of property owned or operated by the state of California. But when it comes to their primary case jurisdiction, they maintain primary case jurisdiction over enforcing California state motor vehicle and traffic laws, such primarily and specifically the California Vehicle Code. That is the primary. State law for which they enforce. Of course, they. When it comes to their overall jurisdiction or legal jurisdiction, of course, they have. So when it comes to their overall and legal jurisdiction, they have statewide jurisdiction throughout the state of California to enforce state laws, any state law. However, with that being said, they maintain primary responsibility and furthermore primary jurisdiction over enforcing state motor vehicle and traffic laws on California highways, state properties, California highways and state properties. Which makes sense considering the California Highway Patrol, they fall under the California State Transportation Agency. If they had fallen under a state Department of Public Safety, they would most likely have also been involved in the enforcement of other laws like state criminal laws. However, they are explicitly focused on the enforcement of state transportation and motor vehicle related laws. When it comes to their authority, California Highway Patrol officers have authority to carry firearms, issue warrantless arrests, and carry out warrants both on duty and off duty throughout their respective jurisdiction. They derive their jurisdiction and authority from the primary law for which they enforce, which is the California Vehicle Code. That's pretty much a bit of an overview of the CHP's jurisdiction and authority for you. CHP officers train for approximately 26 to 27 weeks at the CHP Academy in West Sacramento, California. During their training, they undergo a variety of courses, including those covering number 1, academical standards, number 2, firearm tactics, number 3, emergency vehicle tactics, number 4, physical tactics, number 5, fugitive apprehension tactics. The CHP Academy is often described as one of the most rigorous state police academies in the U.S. I wouldn't say it's the most rigorous, but it is especially rigorous. It's definitely not one of the easiest. But aside from their training, when it comes to their requirements, the bare requirements to joining the CHP are that number 1, you must be a U.S. citizen. Number 2, You must have a general education's diploma or GED or higher. Number three, you must be between the ages of 21 and 37 upon applying and actually joining. Number four, you must be free from past adult criminal records. And number five, you must have an active state issued California driver's license. I also suggest that you have good driving history because they will most likely look through that too. But yeah, that's pretty much it for their main. That's pretty much it for their training and requirements. The CHP works with multiple law enforcement agencies from federal, state to local. At the federal level, they can be seen working with agencies like the Federal Bureau of Investigation or FBI, the U.S. Marshal Service or USMS, the DEA or Drug Enforcement Administration, the U.S. Customs and Border Protection or CBP, the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement or ICE. Just trying to think of others. The U.S. Coast Guard or USCG. And multiple others. So, for example, during the 2025 anti-immigration protests in LA, which is still happening right now, the CHP can be frequently seen working with ICE, on more so controlling the crowds rather than actually conducting their immigration operations. As Governor Newsom highlighted, they are not there to help with ICE's immigration operations, but rather to ensure public safety and control the actual riots. They've been doing that. They've worked with multiple other federal law enforcement agencies in the past too. But at the state level, they can be seen working with agencies like the California Exposition Park Department of Public Safety, the California Exposition and State Fair Police, the California Department of Justice, the California Department of Fish and Game, the California Department of Fish and Game, the California State Parks Peace Officers, just trying to think of others. I'm just trying to think of others. Yeah, and multiple other state law enforcement agencies. They work with many other state law enforcement agencies. They actually work considerably the best with fellow state law enforcement agencies, as they are often the ones conducting very similar operations whatsoever. Their jurisdiction is often parallel or concurrent. But when it comes to at the local level, they'll be seen most likely working the most at. They work with agencies like the LAPD, LASD, and can be seen working with them during things like major protests, security operations, or security patrols. For example, in LA, in certain neighborhoods of LA, such as the southern part of LA, they can be seen working. The CHP can be seen working frequently with the LAPD to stop and deter, state motor vehicle crimes, which are very prevalent in those areas, such as drag racing or street racing, drunk driving, impaired driving, reckless driving, and speeding, and all these state motor vehicle crimes. They very often coordinate with the LAPD to stop them. They work with many law enforcement agencies on a day-to-day basis. So yeah. The rank structure of the CHP from high to low is in the following order: Commissioner, deputy commissioner, assistant commissioner, um, uh, chief, assistant chief, captain, lieutenant, sergeant, officer, and finally cadet. When it comes to the organizational structure of the CHP can be broken down into four main ranks or positions. I'm just going to go with positions because not all are exactly ranks, but some of them are positions within ranks. So, but these four positions can be further broken down into divisions, and then further broken down into units, and subunits, and then so on. These four positions are number one, commissioner, and then number two, deputy commissioner, and then number three, assistant commissioner for staff operations, and then number four, assistant commissioner for field operations. The CHP, as it does fall under the California State Transportation Agency, reports to the head of the California State Transportation Agency, which is the California Secretary of Transportation. And as the California State Transportation Agency falls under the executive branch of the California state government, it therefore reports to the head of the executive branch of the California state government, which is the governor of California. So, furthermore, the California Secretary of Transportation would then report to the governor of California, who is just the top. So yeah.